Imagine for a minute that, you walk in, you're sitting down with the head of sales, and you're the head of marketing, and your CFO walks in the door. The CFO says to the head of marketing, I'm cutting your budget by 20%. Turns to the head of sales and said, what's the impact going to be? The answer to that tells you how aligned you are. But if the head of sales says, well, I'm really sorry about that, then there was no alignment. If the head of sales says, I can't make my number, I can't achieve my goal without that, that's going to impact retention. Suddenly that's really alignment. And that's this deeper way of going across lines, breaking silos down.
All right. Welcome back to Thrivecast. Today we are doing a deep dive in the infrastructure and the concept of the B2B success. I have with me John Neeson. Hopefully that's how you say your last name, John.
It is, yes.
I'm a big fan of Liam Neeson, so your last name reminds me of. John actually pretty much wrote the playbook for the business growth. He was a co-founder and former co-CEO of Cyrus Decisions. Later on, that went to be acquired by Forrester. It's a very renowned advisory firm where he co-authored and built up the entire demand waterfall model. So we'll touch upon that. Our today's topic is again demand waterfall and the future of funnel. I've been very impressed with John. It's an honor to host him on a podcast like this. He's a key executive at various places. He worked as an exec at Gartner. I think you built the concept of ERP.
I marketed it. Yeah, there was an analyst that created, I marketed it. Yeah.
But lately you've been investing, you've been teaching at MIT Sloan, Ithaca College. I'm so impressed with so many things that you do, John. Welcome to the podcast, and I'm going to have a fun time.
Oh, Guru Raj, it's great to see you. Thank you for having me, really.
Okay, thank you so much. So, John, let me kick it off with maybe if you can share a little bit of insights on the origin story of Cyrus Decisions. Why did you go and build a company around it? How was the time at that time very different than today? So, what were the pain points that you're looking to solve? Essentially, how's that? How did you get to that aha moment that hey, I have to now establish a company and take this to the market?
Yeah.
What was the inspiration there?
So it probably goes back to my Gartner days. There was a point when I was at Gartner when I was asked to run marketing. And my first question was, did I do something wrong? I don't know anything about marketing. And, I'd been in the analyst ranks kind of as a quasi-analyst to help promote a product called computer grade manufacturing, which is where ERP came from. I'd been in sales and it was, look, that ERP thing, build more of that concept for Gartner. So I joined, became the head of marketing there. And I kept on saying, well, where's my advisory service? Not the first person to rebrand a company, do demand generation. And I found myself going around to other colleagues in the industry, other consulting firms, and seeing what they were doing. So I always had the idea. The other gentleman who was a co-founder of Sears Richel, he was running sales at the time. So I was comparing notes and kind of thought it would be cool someday to have an advisory firm like Gartner. We went off to do different things. I went and I ran a startup in the healthcare space. I had 6 venture capitalists on my board. I was like, wow, that was painful. It was really painful. The market crashed in '01. So I lost a lot of money doing that. But I realized, okay, I know what to do now. I had the hard knocks of starting a company, called up Rich and said, let's do what we wanted to do and create serious decisions. Now, at that time, this is in 2001, there really was not a good way to measure marketing. That was part of what I was trying to figure out. Every month I'd sit down with Manny Fernandez, who was the CEO of Gartner, and say, okay, John, I gave you $20 million. What'd you give me back? A reasonable question. It was very difficult to answer. So we started Serious Decisions with the idea of let's do some benchmarking. We're going to be able to collect data to see what companies are spending in marketing, how they're trying to use it. And we were really trying to figure out how do we measure this thing called B2B marketing. And for the first 4 years of Serious, it was really a consulting firm. We were going and doing consulting, and then we converted it to the advisory firm, subscription-based model, much like Gartner, but focused on sales, marketing, and product management. And it was during that time we were kind of found that, there's different stages that are happening in marketing. There's an inquiry stage, somebody raises their hand, then marketing's doing things to create what a lead is, and they're passing it to sales. And some of our early consulting projects, they're with large companies, and they would ask the question, how do we define a lead? Like, really? You guys are, multi-billion dollars, you haven't figured that out yet? And I realized there's so much into the alignment between sales and marketing that they really couldn't quite figure that out. So we stumbled across this idea of, hey, there is a waterfall that happens. And actually, if I were to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have called it a waterfall. It was sort of an aspect of we're trying to explain to a financial services company how this cascading effect of B2B go to market works. And we said, there's a waterfall chart. Well, it's kind of like that. And that was the origins of it. And we, started to see then, hey, there's this inquiry phase, this marketing qualified lead, there's different phases. So we kind of started to write what those stages really were. That's really where we came up with the demand waterfall.
So at that time, John, was there CRM? There were many CRM companies at that time, right? Siebel was, I think, was there. Salesforce was probably just starting up at that time.
It
Is
was
that right?
just, yeah, it was just starting up. That was sort of the origins of where digital marketing really started to sort of take off. So it's still rather clumsy. And I would say our early clients, we would come back to them and say, here's our best thinking. And then things began to evolve where you started to be able to see things that were more happening digitally and you could measure effectively. And then suddenly there was also a big shift in marketing spend. Demand generation was the one area for the 18 years that I had Sirius, it never went down. It always went up because you could get returns and understand it much much better. So at the same time, when you think about that time, now go fast forward to like 2005 to 2010. Now there were some technologies. There was Eloqua. There were other. Marketo was probably coming out right about that time. There were other technologies allowing you to really think of the buyer's journey. That was one of our key innovations, was to say, let's think about how buyers buy, because the sales process is really internal steps of how you're trying to sell. So to do nurturing, you needed technology to be able to do it. You need to think about that buyer's journey. And you could suddenly do more things digitally. You could start to
Mhm.
create, what a lead was, and eventually see how it's going to become an opportunity. And you had data that you could begin to kind of measure how things were going. And that is a very, very interesting aspect going from there to today. Now looking to see how technology has really changed. There were three demand waterfalls. The first one was pretty simple. The second one got more detailed, looking at all the aspects of go-to-market, inbound marketing, outbound marketing, how to accommodate for the sales marketing they're doing to measure all of that. And it became sophisticated. You could really start to measure, what was really happening. Now, fast forward, the third waterfall really was happening is suddenly buyers, were doing much more digitally. And sellers were finding I'm coming in to meet with a buyer, and they're pretty far down the path, and I didn't know it. And they didn't need to create demand, they needed to activate demand. So the third waterfall, which was around 2015, 2016, was really looking at how do you activate that. It was called the demand unit waterfall. So it's much more akin to what you see today in account-based marketing. That was sort of the surge that we saw in account-based marketing at that time, and still is there today, where you're more or less having the ability to activate demand while creating at the same time. And now you have a much more sophisticated way to evaluate that. And even today, I think the numbers are 40. I think the average B2B buyer is 45 years old or less. So they're very digitally savvy, and you need to have more sophistication in kind of what's occurring. So I think now in today's world, what's interesting is that means that I also need a more sophisticated way to do my analytics, not only with the creation of something to
Mhm.
where they're going to buy, but also what happens after that.
Yeah.
After that, that relationship becomes really, really so important, which is where, frankly, I found Winning by Design. I found you kind of saying, wow, here's a way to look at this much more closed loop bow tie, if you will, looking at all these different elements to really, truly understand it. And that's what really is needed today in the analytics and is needed today in the digital journey, is to understand fully what's happening in that relationship from the time you're raising the hand to the time you're renewing. You got to be able to look at all of those different areas. So it's much more sophisticated than it certainly was when we started Sirius.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to the bow tie model, but I think you mentioned a
Yeah.
couple of things. You did mention about raising a hand, right? In your mind, was the buyer looking for a solution at that time versus where the sales team? I'm trying to go back to the early 2000s. Was the demand really led by the sales team or the marketing team trying to go reach out and trying to go sell? Versus, do you see that very different now, wherein there's a lot more pull? I need a solution like this, and if you have it, I'm going to go buy it. If not, I'll move to the next vendor. Do you see a difference between then and now in the way the demand was created, where the pull versus the push model came into being?
Very much so. I do. I do. I think that, if you even you go back, 20, 25 years, it was very common for someone buying technical solutions say, well, let me meet with salespeople because I'll learn about what they're doing. They don't need to do that now. The internet has much more of that information. So at that time, yeah, the early days of Cirrus, you were looking to create demand, where the buyer wasn't exactly sure what they wanted, but there also wasn't enough intelligence on the internet to allow them to be able to figure that out. Today, it's very different. The buyers are very sophisticated, where they pretty much before you walk in the door, they understand who you are personally. They also understand what your product really is all about. So it's a much more sophisticated way in which I need to kind of read the digital body language very differently. And there's an expectation that you've done your homework before you even
Yeah.
walk in the door.
Yeah. Maybe a related question to that. Do you see in the way that companies sell and the channels that the companies sell, do you see that it's changing a lot? I'm not necessarily talking about the digital sales. I'm talking about in general across the board. Do you see more of a product-led approach starting to become more mainstream, or do you see that it is still, a lot more demand gen activities, and then if they like, if they have many touch points and they generally are in that ICP bucket, they might potentially pull you in. The buyer might pull the product in. What do you see the balance between the product led world versus the sales led world? And do you see them merging, one trouncing the other over a period of time?
So it's a very interesting question. I mean, product-led growth, when you look at, the companies, Datadog, Slack, Zoom, all these organizations become huge companies as a result of product-led growth. It is They've done a very nice job of thinking about their segmentation, finding a community that's going to be able to want to explore this solution, and then suddenly they begin to flourish, and now you do more of your marketing. It's a much more cost-effective way of doing marketing. So I think the product-led growth area will continue, and you might see it start to go in areas beyond technology. But I think it's definitely more important. One of the lessons learned along the way as we were studying how do you create demand and how do you harness demand.
Hmm.
We kind of concluded that there's three different demand buckets. One is it's pretty established, so I got a budget item for it. I know what it is. I can look at activating that demand. You could argue that Salesforce is not looking to create demand. They're looking to find somebody who's going to buy in the next 90 days. Then the next category is new paradigm, where here's an existing solution done a very different way. I still kind of know what it is though, and therefore I've got some budget for it. I can kind of work with it as well. So I might have to create a little of that, but I can still harness the interest and create some demand. The third category is a brand new concept where this is a new category. So I've got to go back and I got really to figure out how I'm going to build the category. If you look at HubSpot as probably a really good example of this in its early days, they were doing all this work in inbound marketing to help people understand the category so they could sell their product.
Hmm.
In that context, that's harder to do product-led growth in that area unless you find a community that actually can work really well. So it's not impossible, but you might need to create demand there. And this is where in my teaching, one of the things that is still tried and true is using Moore's chasm model, because it's really what you're doing is you're saying, let me find those visionaries that are going to grab my product and use it, and then they're going to go to the early majority and eventually get their way to the late majority. So that is still a very conscious way of saying I could still do product-led techniques. I can find more ways to harness demand that's there. So it has balance. It really has balance. It's still, I think there are companies that still need to go create it. But I think that there is more opportunity to harness what's there through modern techniques.
So let me understand this. So the first model is like the Salesforce model where the demand's already there. They're just trying to close,
Correct.
get to someone who can actually have the budget and pay for it. The second one you mentioned is more like a compete model to Salesforce. The category exists, but the differentiators might be maybe lower cost or some other, simpler way to do exactly what Salesforce does.
Different approach. Yep.
Different approach. And the third one is a completely different approach to solve a very similar problem, but the approach is,
It's a new category. Yep.
natural language, AI, whatever that might be.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And AI is a very interesting aspect in that. Um, it's so there's so much there that it requires a little bit of thought of how you're going to leverage it and some experimentation. You have to be willing to do some experimentation. But it's like anything else. If you go to Gartner's hype cycle, we're definitely going up the trough, and there's going to be at some point some consolidation. When you look at some of these large companies, that they will consolidate a lot of the market. It is definitely something that it's here. It's not going anywhere. You need to embrace it. You need to figure it out, and it's going to have a dramatic impact. It already is in the marketing that we're doing.
Yeah. So maybe that's a segue into, into my next question to you is, does the demand waterfall model that you pioneered, does that playbook still hold good? I mean, does the MQL, SQLs, and all these way of measuring stage by stage, does that still work well in the industry, or is that only for physical products? For digital products, it's changing quite a bit.
I think
What's
it's evolved. I think that that model is incomplete in today's world. I think in today's world, you've got a buyer's journey that is more dynamic. You need greater ability to kind of pull them towards you. You need to be really a good content marketer, a good, storyteller to kind of pull people in, have a conversation, and then move the process along. So I do think it's very different. You still have measurement stages, which the waterfall really provided you. But now, you're looking at how can I connect with a community, or I should say with a buying unit, a function, and sort of pull them together so I can harness the demand that they're creating. So it definitely has changed. I mean, I think can you use the old model? You can, but you're going to evolve away from it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm inspired by how you think about this. So refreshing these models are, it's not like once and done. You have to keep on refreshing these models. So on the same topic, I want to touch upon, I think, some articles that I read, that you've written some time back, is about leads. How does one qualify them as leads? And then you essentially started writing about them as demand units in those days. So do you still see, the combination where both digital and physical products now have trials? You can actually go to Tesla and say, hey, I want to go do, a 7-day trial, and they will give you a lease and you can do a trial. You can do a refrigerator now. You can go buy it from the store and say, hey, I want to go try this refrigerator 7 days or so. You can go to Carvana and you can buy a car for 7 days. If you don't like it, turn it back. Same is the case with beds. Free trials are coming in. The mattresses, free trials are coming in. Do you see this lead, the concept of lead, uh, changing based on not necessarily whether the buyer has the budget, because you may or may not know, but the buyer has a problem and they are willing to go try your product? What do you see is the new demand unit that's
Yep.
slowly starting to emerge?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. And I think also you need to look at sort of where the company is in their stage of growth. I was listening yesterday to a really great podcast called Grit with the head of marketing and head of sales from Salesforce, or excuse me, Snowflake.
Hmm.
And the head of sales said, "Look, in the early days, I got this Salesforce. I need leads. I need them to be my salespeople to be busy. I need them to follow up on things." So there is this aspect of, okay, we're growing this area. We need them to get in front of people. But at the same time, they also shared that it took a while for them to even get the Salesforce productive because they were building this new category. It was a little difficult to do. So I think in the early stages, you might be a little bit more towards the lead area. I need to get things into my sellers' hands so they can go take action. But that quickly evolves to my buyers understand this a little bit more, and I can't waste my salespeople's time going down the path of something that may not be productive. I'd rather have them spend times on things that are productive. I can take this digital world, have much more value interactions that they're now going to be able to mature. So by the time it gets to my salesperson, they have a group of people, it's a demand unit that they can understand in the business, and they can interact with them. And I think that's part of the evolution that we've kind of seen where digital marketing really has come.
Yeah. Let me ask, a parallel question to this. Maybe a leading question there would be, uh, do you see pretty much all the categories that you can go build something have been taken? There's so much competition nowadays that every single one has invented a category or it's in a new category. There's about 300, 400 products in every single category that even Gartner and Forrester and everyone essentially lists down. These are growing much more rapidly now. So building a demand, it's going to be a lot more painful as we go forward.
It's an interesting question, and I think sometimes One of the classes I teach is entrepreneurial marketing. We bring in real companies and we do a project for them, which is a lot of fun. And most of the founders will tell you, yeah, it's a brand new category, got this new thing. And it may not be. It might be, if you're familiar with kind of the red ocean, blue ocean, the idea of a blue ocean is I'm extending an existing category. I'm making it different. And I think that founders would do themselves a service by thinking more blue ocean and thinking more new category, because then there's some association with to say, if you know this category, we've extended it and we've just made it bigger, made it better. I could argue that yeah, I'm like a gardener. I just extended the category, but I went to a different market of sales, marketing, product management. That's all it was a blue ocean. So, and I could go into a tech company and say, Gartner, cool. We're the Gartner of sales, marketing,
Okay.
product management. So it helped a lot. And there was no, at one point we were 90% tech. And then, because we'd go into a healthcare company and say, Gartner is, they say, we have no idea what you're talking about. So that changed over time. About half the business came from tech and the others came from other industries. But again, it was a blue ocean strategy versus a new category. So I do think that there's a little bit of, very shiny thing. I want to create a brand new category. I don't think founders need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. I have a subsequent question to that one. I think your concept of the demand waterfall, it essentially extends from marketing to sales, to a tad bit of the product, right? And you mentioned about the bow tie model, and I think Dave and Jacko's team at Winning by Design are really pioneers in looking at the entire spectrum of all the touch points, all the way from marketing touch points to product activation engagement touch points to revenue touch points, retention, and all of that. The question there is that those are good on paper, but within a company, these are all different teams.
Yep.
Experience as you were essentially building Cyrus or serious decisions at that time, right? So sales, marketing, and product all together. Did you encounter pushbacks from individual silos? I mean, sales and marketing and product were all different silos. Even now, more or less, they are silos, but with analytics coming in, scorecards coming in, it collapses a little bit. But during that time, when you were building this, would you encounter pushbacks on how should you really look at this holistically versus individual silos? And any thoughts on that?
Definitely, we ran into that, and there's still some of that today. That there are silos, and the silos really need to be broken down. And some of that is really through leadership that needs to be kind of broken down as well. Where I think this is where the marketing qualified lead became cool to have, but all of a sudden became detrimental because you could have marketing raising the victory flag of look at the MQLs and sales going, well, what did it really do? Really didn't do much. There is an aspect of alignment that becomes really, really important. We did studies this series that we found companies that were really good at alignment. The profitability was better, the revenue growth was better, the retention was better. And that's looking at holistically the relationship with their customers and having an understand how we're going to interact with them. What's the role of product? What's the role of marketing? What's the role of sales? So having that ability to have from soup to nuts how is this engine going to work. And for me, I would always tell the CMOs, if you really want to know how your marketing is, ask a few salespeople. Is it any good? How's it going? And they might be fearful of that. Or the scenario I love is, imagine for a minute that you walk in, you're sitting down with the head of sales and you're the head of marketing, and your CFO walks in the door. The CFO says to the head of marketing, I'm cutting your budget by 20%. Turns to the head of sales and said, what's the impact going to be? The answer to that tells you how aligned you are. And if the head of sales says, well, I'm really sorry about that, then there was no alignment. If the head of sales says, I can't make my number, I can't achieve my goal without that, that's going to impact retention. Suddenly that's really alignment. And that's this deeper way of going across lines, breaking silos down. And some of that, I think, is the maturity that starts to happen in how you're going to measure things. So instead of measuring an MQL, you measure opportunity. How do we
Yeah.
look at the opportunity that's created? Because that's something mutually that's going to be occurring. You don't have to have, you shouldn't have, your bonuses necessarily being siloed. Rather, they should be more integrated together. So I think that's where, in some ways, there was nothing there, and now everyone wants to be measured. Then suddenly you suddenly say, "Wow, this has got to look a little bit differently." Even on the product side, a product manager will want to say, "I really care about my product, not everybody else's." But really, if your product's not selling, It's probably not the sales force. It's probably not marketing. It's something wrong with the product. So we need to kind of look at that. And there's inherently a lot of really good intelligence you can figure out. I think one of the things that when Gong first came out, you had product managers listening in sales calls, going, "Wow, what I think this product does, they're saying something different." So I have this visibility that I suddenly can see. So the more that we can look at the entire process, get data from it, align ourselves around that, the better off we're going to be. That I think was part of the problem. It sort of went to one area. We made a sale and was okay. That was great. Well, that's just the beginning, right? That's the beginning. There's much more to go on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to if you understand your customers' problems, you can actually go build a better solution. But if you start off with a solution and you're trying to retrofit that to customers' problem, that's where the product managers will always be at shock. Like, hey,
Totally.
they're talking something completely different.
Yes. Yes, they are.
I want to give you, an interesting anecdote from last. We were at a customer, essentially talking about the silos, right? So this
Yep.
is what happened last week. We had deployed our Thrive Stack product, and they're essentially looking at, hey, here's my number of visitors coming in through marketing channels, number of repeat visitors coming in, and these guys have filled a form, so some kind of lead gen, so calling that as an MQL. And then because we were able to go do all the touch points all the way from marketing to product to revenue to retention, we essentially showed them the aspect that almost only 1% or less than that are translating into product signups, and even within that, you have only about 8 to 10% of them getting activated. So you're
Hmm.
putting a lot more money into your demand gen activities, but ultimately products are not getting activated. So your free to try, free to paid conversion is abysmally low. And not just that, your retention on these things are, your churn is about closer to 7 to 10%. And when we actually showed them the graph that if you continue to put more in the pipeline from the top and your retention, you don't necessarily solve that, you will essentially flatline in the next 1 to 2 years time. No matter what you do, you will flatline. And we won that contract with them with just that aspect, that we were able to showcase that they have a major problem in the entire funnel, all the way from marketing to product to revenue handoffs to to retention. And this is shocking. It's shocking to me because I didn't come from a GTM world. I came from a cybersecurity world. I came from cloud world, right? This is shocking to me. I'm more of a product guy than a GTM guy. Sure enough, because of my you know ventures, I'm doing a lot more of the selling in GTM. But do you see this trend happening a lot more frequently, that most companies focus on the acquisition part of the funnel rather than the entire funnel, which includes even the retention?
I do, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Which you by looking at all of them, you have the greater ability to say, here's where you can be most efficient. And without that, the question will be, how can we get more on the top? And it's usually not the right answer. Usually there's, how do I take what I have and make it more efficient? How do I take what I have and actually work with it so it can be more productive? I'd say 90% of the time, any company I've ever worked with, the answer is not, you need more inquiries. The answer is, I need actually more productivity throughout. But you've got to understand, where are some of the breakdowns, because there could be something on the product side where they're not activating, and perhaps that's a product issue. Perhaps there's something there that needs to be evaluated, or maybe there's some intervention that needs to happen from a sales standpoint that's not. So those can be, actually having that data allows you to say, let's tweak a few things. Without that data, you're kind of guessing once they certainly get to maybe acquisition, but you don't really have enough understanding of the process of what's going on.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think if you tie that together to the new world AI led, fully native AI companies like Cursor and Bolt, and
Yeah.
the competition is so much in the vibe coding space that you can actually pretty much stand up a new company, build it on Claude or Anthropic or OpenAI models. It's going to fly off very, very quickly. So you can go from 0 to 50 million ARR in record time. Like Lovable went, from zero to, I think from 1 to 50 million ARR in about 4 to 5 months. And now they're 100 million ARR at 6 months time since
Yes.
they reached this. So, but the retention is horrible. People are now moving. They don't have any loyalty to the product. You can solve the problem here. That's good. If not, I'm going to go shut down the subscription here, go to another company, another vendor. So I think building a formidable company, is a lot more difficult now. Building a formidable product is a lot more easier, but building a long-lasting, growth company is becoming a lot more difficult. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you have?
I do. I do agree with that because I think that the mind shift is one where let's just acquire new companies. And that's not, it's really how do I acquire them, develop them, make them productive. So the actual community that they're going to be part of are going to help generate more business for us. And it's been more lopsided and they haven't really looked at all the different aspects of the relationship that you have. And that's, I think, where by taking a step back, saying, I really have to think through all of this now. Where I think the predominant thinking for particularly younger companies before was, let's just get as many new customers as we can. We'll figure out this retention thing later. And you kind of look at SaaS, the last few years, they've struggled a little bit because they've had that sort of imbalance that suddenly they've realized they have to think about this a little bit differently and be more disciplined.
Yeah. So, and talking about discipline, I think you and your company were the first ones, or the pioneers in the industry, to introduce an analytical way to tie, sales, marketing, and product. Where do you see that
Yes.
going as we go forward? And maybe a subsequent question to that is the market at a place where almost everyone is going to use analytics? Do you see pockets of companies who are still siloed? What do you see there out there?
I think they're going to have to use analytics. I think that is the way, the future is here. I think they're going to need it. It actually, if I go back to looking at marketing spend, the area that also always increased was marketing operations, the investment in analytics and systems and data. I think with AI, there's greater sophistication now. So you can do it a lot quicker. Even I find myself in this part of my life, in academics and working with companies in the academic side. The college I went to, I donated money for a digital analytics lab because it's so important. And kids are not coming out of college using hands-on tools. We're having to train them. So that was the whole idea behind it. So there's this challenge of how do we get the next group ready for these areas. But yeah, I do think that every company is going to need to be more thoughtful in their analytics. They're going to have to invest in it, and they're going to have to use them. And by doing it, they're actually going to save money longer term and be much more efficient.
I know we'll probably run out of time very quickly. I want to touch upon a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing out there, probably the future trends. If I were to ask you in maybe 10 years or so, what changed in the last 10 years, maybe in 2035, if I ask you, what would you predict?
Guru Raj, I lost you. Well, I think Guru Raj, your question was what would happen in the next 10 years? First of all, 10 years from now, we're not going to be talking about digital marketing because AI will have subsumed that. I think that was you had the era where you had a lot of digital marketers, but now it's going to be more, AI is going to have a much more prominent role, which it is today. There you are.
Yeah. So something happened on Riverside for me, and we'll probably come back to it. So sorry, I was asking you about the trends in the next decade, and then I dropped off suddenly. What
Yeah,
do you
no,
see?
yeah, it's a good question. I think that, even today, I've been teaching a class in digital marketing analytics, and I've gone back to the school to say, I got to rewrite this. It shouldn't be digital marketing, it should be AI marketing and analytics. That's really what this is going to be. So I don't think in 10 years we'll be talking about digital marketing. I think that's going to go away in the next couple of years, and we'll really be talking about AI. Like, I think that's really kind of where more of the future is. And I think, marketers have got a little bit of an advantage in that we've been using machine learning and things like market automation for some time. So we're kind of, I think, AI ready in some ways. And you're already starting to see agentic AI and how it's being used, the leverage of content, the leverage in its segmentation. So I think we're going to have much more precision as we're looking down the road of how we're going to be going to market. And I think the trend that you're seeing in account-based marketing, the ability to pull forward and harness demand that's already there,
Mhm.
is you'll see an environment where, hey, I'm going to have really, really good, valuable content you interact with. I'm going to be really good with your ability to understand your body language, digitally through AI tools, and I'm going to understand the right time in which to interact with you. So I think we have an opportunity versus today. We still have, let's keep on, overburdening people with emails, overburdening them with requests. I heard the other day, I was talking to a chief security officer, he gets 200 emails like every 2 days. So that's just not productive. That's not going to work. So I think we have an opportunity to have an analytics future that allows us to be much more precise in how we reach out to people, interact with them, and also work across silos more effectively. I think we'll be in a very, very different place.
Yeah, so I think, talking about that, so do you see, maybe a very specific question there, do you see a buyer's journey changing? For example, just 5 years back, 10 years back, you run an email campaign, a newsletter campaign on ads or something, and then you'd click on it and come to your website, right? And then you keep on coming there. Over a period of time, you would go browse a little more, download some white papers, and then talk to the sales. Very recently, we've been talking to some companies where the website traffic has dropped significantly, almost 80% drop in the website traffic, but they're getting more qualified leads from chat gpt where
Yeah,
buyers
I'm just going to
are.
go. Yeah.
So would you predict that chat gpt or openai was going to become a massive marketplace for all of these?
Well, I mean, think about 10 years from now. Are you going to do your search in Google or are you going to do your search in some AI platform? It's probably going to be an AI platform. So that's the part where, now how will we harness demand from those
Yeah.
platforms? That's something we haven't figured out just yet. But that I think that will definitely be the next wave. We still like, as consumers, we like to shop, so we're still going to shop. We're probably still going to be doing that. But I think the intelligence of our shopping is going to be generated much more in some form from AI. It's going to help us make it much more precise, productive. So when somebody is coming onto your website, it might be very different in the interaction that they're having with you. You might be not having to go through volumes of data, but rather, hey, I can go through and be more specific with this person because it's clear that they're a qualified buyer.
Yeah. So I think there you have it, John. You have predicted the future. Let me ask that to you in about 6 months to a year's time, whether what you predicted right now is about 5 to 10 years from now. Very likely, I think it might be next year.
Could
More
be.
and more of these buyer journeys will
Yeah.
emanate not from search, but from questions that you'll find answers, and then you'll buy something or you build something towards that. I was talking to one of the Klaviyo execs, and they had Salesforce deployed, as a CRM. They started writing their own using AI vibe coding tools. They started writing their own CRM, and they moved away from Salesforce. So I see that as a massive trend, that people will write code themselves, and solve their problems rather than buying from another SaaS company. So with that said, John, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
It's an honor to host you. We will essentially have some show notes and then have links to your LinkedIn bio and to maybe some of the articles that you might have written. Again, appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to see you. Okay. Take care now.